President Joe Biden decided to cave into pressure from right-wingers in the Senate to decouple a bill that would have included military spending for Ukraine, but also, I would venture to say more importantly, it would also appropriate some funding for COVID-related matters. Well, he's now decoupling it to ensure that we prioritize military spending for Ukraine. And it's very unlikely that there will be any new funding allocated for COVID, which is an issue considering the fact that we are now having yet another wave of COVID. I would know since I got it again, but nonetheless, let me give you the details. Biden and Democratic leaders had hoped to move a coronavirus aid package alongside the Ukraine aid, using the Ukrainian assistance as leverage to secure additional COVID funding, but Republicans balked. And you know what happens when Republicans balk. Democrats run away and cry about it. Republicans balked, saying they would not approve new money to fight the pandemic without a vote on Biden's decision to end a Trump-era border policy known as Title 42. So Republicans, of course, are like, oh yeah, you want COVID-related funding included to make sure that people get tested, to make sure that people have access to monoclonal antibody treatments without going bankrupt. Yeah, we're not willing to do that unless we involve yet another issue, and that has to do with expelling people at the border immediately and not allowing asylum seekers in. But remember, at the heart of this is funding for Ukraine, which is really, listen, we've said it a million times, we're not necessarily against helping Ukraine. I am against helping Ukraine in lieu of helping the American people, so let me be clear about that. And also, the money, we all know what happens, right? It's a way of redistributing taxpayer money from the bottom to defense contractors. We know that Republicans love that because Republicans, much like Democrats, are heavily funded by private military contractors. So they want to do this for their donors. If Biden was willing to play hardball, he could have gotten what he wants, but he's not willing to play hardball. So apparently he had a conversation with Mitch McConnell. I actually want to go to that graphic next. So Manu Raju reported that McConnell says he called Biden last week and asked them to separate out Ukraine aid from COVID aid. He said Biden told him he would think about it and called back just 15 minutes later and said he agrees. I think we are on the path to getting it done, McConnell said of Ukraine.
Loser.
Okay, total loser, total loser. How Biden and Democratic leadership, how do you think this plays out for you? To essentially message to the American people that we are willing to send tens of billions of dollars in military aid to Ukraine, but we can't even appropriate a measly 10 billion for COVID-related spending to make sure people can get tested, to make sure people can get treated. It's just, it is unreal. They are absolute losers. Now, I'll tell you what Biden's strategy is to win in a second, but Cenk, I want to open this up to you.
Yeah, so let's be clear on a bunch of things. So they're going to help Ukraine before they help America. We want to help Ukraine, but we also want to help American citizens. Doing it at the same time, perfect. But if you're going to prioritize, you could go with what Republicans say, what's the phrase? America first. Now, what Biden could have done, if he was a strong leader, and if he actually believed anything he says, is he could have said, no, Mitch, go ahead and eat it. And here's what I mean by that. You go publicly and tell the American people you do not want to give them COVID relief. I'm asking for 1/3 to America. I'm sorry, 1/4 to America out of the 40 billion, and 3/4 to Ukraine. And you're gonna say no to the 1/4, just the 1/4 that's going to America. Go ahead, do it. I dare you to do it. And I'm gonna kick the living crap out of you in the elections and say, Mitch McConnell didn't want you to get relief. He wanted you to get more sick. He wanted you to get COVID. And all of our COVID problems are because of Mitch McConnell. He wouldn't do the funding. He wouldn't do the goddamn funding. It's so simple. And then, by the way, Mitch, you're blocking the Ukraine funding, which I know you don't want to block because that's your defense contractor donors and they're gonna kick your ass if you block that funding, right? But hey, have at it, Hoss. I'll go on TV and say, the Ukrainians need our help. And Mitch McConnell's helping Russia by blocking the funding to Ukraine. What a monster. Those are two giant wins. Instead, Biden, like the absolute pathetic weakling that he is, called back 15 minutes later. Okay, Mitch, I'll do anything you ask, Mitch. And by the way, that is the career of Joe Biden. And we told you during the primaries. And mainstream media was like, you are so rude for pointing out the actual history of Joe Biden. We're all supposed to cover for him. No, we're not. No, we're not. We're supposed to be reporters and tell people the truth. What has Biden done his entire career? Cave into Mitch McConnell. I can give you dozens of examples, but the one that I point to, because even corporate Democrats were like, Joe, Jesus Christ, this was a bridge too far, was when he made 94% of the Bush tax cuts for the rich permanent under Obama. Biden negotiated that with McConnell and gave him everything he wanted. Biden is a Trojan horse for Republicans. You put him in, pretend he's a Democrat, and his job is to call back 15 minutes later and go, yes, sir, you're my actual boss, sir. I'll do anything you say. Remember all this stuff, and they're still saying it. Oh, Biden listened to Bernie too much. Okay, name a policy of Bernie's that passed. None, zero. The bare minimum was $15 minimum wage. Voting rights, none of it passed. None of it passed. Name a policy that McConnell likes. I can show you a dozen that passed. I can show you 24 that passed. We don't have a Democratic president. We have a Democrat who's a servant of Republicans like Mitch McConnell. These are obvious facts. By the way, later, you know what the Republicans will do? They'll say, can you believe that Biden did the aid for Ukraine but not for America? No.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
They'll just use it against them.
They'll say that they're America first.
Exactly.
That they would have ensured that Americans got everything they needed and that Americans would be prioritized before any other foreign country. I mean, they would lie. Because fact of the matter is Biden caved to the Republican Party and caved to military contractors who serve as donors for both parties. But it doesn't matter. Republicans succeed in lying. They succeed in lying and they can point to exactly what Biden was willing to do today. By the way, let's go to graphic 4 here. Biden's decision to separate the two bills should help clear the way for congressional approval of nearly $40 billion in funding for Ukraine, but leaves in limbo a $10 billion pandemic relief bill. So even, by the way, even if they did succeed, if Biden did succeed in getting this bill passed without decoupling those two provisions, it still doesn't look so great when you're allocating $40 billion for Ukraine, another round of funding, by the way. It's not like this is the first round of funding. And then you compare that to the 10 billion that would go to the American people for coronavirus.
Yeah.
It's bad. So let's
Can I just say one quick thing there? And so in case you're wondering, like, wow, man, they care so much about Ukraine. Yeah, sure, they do care a little bit about the Ukrainians. They care about weakening Russia, et cetera. But mainly the reason why they're all animated is because all of the money is going to the defense contractors. And so when Biden says we had to pass it right away, that's why I couldn't delay, I had to agree with McConnell. That's actually not true. The weapons are already made and being sent to Ukraine. What we're paying for is weapons that are going to be made later to replenish our stocks. So there's no emergency at all. Every part of it is a lie.
Now, what is Biden planning to do to win re-election, to ensure that Democrats don't take a beating during the midterm elections? We'll get a load of this. This is a headline from The Hill. Biden seeks to frame election as choice between Democrats and MAGA GOP. Oh, wow, that sounds like a totally new strategy that Democrats have never tried before. I wonder if it'll work. So in other words, we didn't get you anything except for some coronavirus relief early on in my presidency and a bipartisan corporate handout bill that has some provisions that might benefit you a little bit in the coming years. But vote for us because GOP bad, orange man bad, which by the way is true. But I would venture to say, and we have case studies from the past to refer to prove my point here. People don't get excited to show up to the polls to prevent another party from winning. People get excited to show up, to take time out of their day, to use up their own resources, to go to the polls and vote because they're excited about a party or they're excited about a particular candidate. But even that, Cenk, even that strategy, he's not even really gonna do that strategy.
No.
Because like he's making calls. He's like, homeboy McConnell, what do you think I should do with decoupling this defense industry handout versus COVID relief.
Yeah.
And then he'll take orders from Mitch McConnell as if he's not the president, as if Mitch McConnell's the president of the United States, the unelected leader of the United States.
Things are actually a little bit worse than you just stated. So let me explain why. First, on that COVID bill, it's gone. It has no chance of passing now. Its best chance of passing was forcing the Republicans to defy their donors in the defense industry. Without that leverage, well, then obviously it's not going to get any Republican votes, and we can't break the filibuster, so it has no chance of passing. So he gave up on it. Let's just be super clear about that. And by the way, Republicans want COVID to get worse so they could blame Biden for it. And a lot of the press is helping him now. I've seen a lot of articles about well, COVID, there's another round of it. It must be Biden's fault. Meanwhile, Mitch McConnell blocked aid going to help on COVID response, and Biden agreed with him. And now there's going to be no help for COVID. And McConnell's laughing his ass off. And what an idiot Joe Biden is. It was so easy to block the COVID response, and they're gonna blame Biden for it. Now, the part where Anna explained that this is a new strategy where Biden is going to fight the GOP. Think about that, guys, and it's not an exaggeration. You can read any mainstream media article today, almost anywhere, and they're like, Joe Biden taking a risky move. He's now going to frame things as Democrats versus Republicans. Well, what the hell was it? Of course it's Democrats versus Republicans. For him to actually dip his toe into fighting Republicans, they're like, whoa, big move by the Democratic leader. He's thinking about representing his own party during the elections. And maybe even fighting a tiny bit against the Republicans. And by the way, he's not wrong to be scared in the sense that, what did the mainstream media do? A lot of the articles are like, well, I don't know. He said he was gonna unify. He said he was gonna do bipartisanship. Is this breaking his promise? I mean, he promised to be right in between Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump's ass cheeks. And it looks like he's not fully in. God damn it, right? The lunatics in Washington think that the Democrats shouldn't fight the Republicans, that it's uncivil.
No, Jake, they want Democrats to take on GOP messaging. So final thing on this, Mike Morey, who's a Democratic strategist, a real winner, had this to say about Biden's strategy and what he needs to do to win. Quote, Biden needs to make sure every American knows that Republicans have a plan to raise taxes on your small business. So basically co-opt right-wing messaging about taxes. Okay, he continues, Biden needs to be aggressive in telling every small landscaper, home bakery, Etsy-based business, and home childcare company that Republicans don't think you pay enough in taxes. If they take control of Congress, they will raise your taxes. That is word for word Republican campaign messaging, word for word. So is Mike Morey a Democratic strategist or is he a Republican strategist?
It doesn't
and also,
matter.
Is he? It doesn't matter exactly. I mean, it's same thing at this point. And also, it's probably not going to work because look, that's messaging that would theoretically appeal to small business owners, small vendors who sell on platforms like Etsy. He apparently doesn't know that the IRS under the Biden administration decided to target not wealthy corporations that are evading taxes, but specifically small businesses and vendors who allegedly aren't paying enough in taxes. That didn't happen under Trump, that happened under Biden.
Yeah.
And so like the messaging, like it wouldn't even work for the people that they're specifically trying to target here. And besides which, it's just GOP messaging. It's not gonna work. How about you give people something, right? Something substantive, something that materially improves their lives. Why don't you do that? But that's a no-go because that would actually mean that Biden would have to go against corporate donors, possibly raise taxes on corporations and the rich to help fund for programs that actually are incredibly popular among the American people. And even when it comes to reproductive rights, guys, I mean, codifying reproductive rights isn't gonna take much money, if any money at all. They're not even willing to fight for that. Even though 70% of Americans support Roe v. Wade and do not want to overturn it. Yeah. Now, Democrats love to lose. They're addicted to it, I mean, I've never seen addiction like this in my life.
And it's just, if you're wondering why are business owners have to be a tiny, tiny percentage of the electorate, why are they framing all their message towards business owners? That's because they're the top donors. That's why the Democratic strategist is like, now here's our plan to make sure that we please all the business owners in the country. Okay, but how are you going to win the election? The election, I know how you're gonna raise money and stuff it into your pockets. They're the worst of the worst. So, okay, and there's still people who believe in New York Times and MSNBC and CNN, and they'll say, no, Cenk, you guys are being really rude. Biden and Pelosi and Schumer are doing four-dimensional chess. They used to say that about Obama too. Oh, but at the end, we're gonna win on all of our policies. We've won on none of them, and we're not gonna win on any of them. And Joe Biden and Pelosi and Schumer are going to absolutely butcher this 22 election. It's going to be, even with Roe, with 70% of the country on our side, that's their opportunity to make a comeback and actually win these elections. And they're going to blow it because they're losers. They're weak, and they actually work for the Republicans. So they're going to find a way to bungle it when 70% of the country's on their side. They're the worst of the worst.